for our February Phoenix Forum event, which is a discussion on the Brown County Port and Recovery Department, as well as some updates. We have our speakers joining us, all UW Green Bay alumni from the Brown County Port and Recovery Department. We have Dean Hain, graduate from 91, Director, Benjamin Hintz, the landfill manager, graduated in 08, and Christopher Bland, resource recovery technician, graduated in 2000. So they will share an overview of the Brown County Port and Recovery Department, hazardous material recovery program, recycling, and also discuss our items in our South Landfill and Transfer Station. So my name is Brian Raymer. I'm the Director of Alumni Relations here at UW Green Bay. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. First, please know that this session is being recorded and we'll share on our Phoenix Forum webpage for others to view. Second, we would like all attendees, other than the presenters, to mute yourselves. You should find that mic icon on the top of the page. This presentation is interactive though, so please feel free to ask questions throughout by typing your questions in the chat box, or when appropriate, you can unmute yourself and certainly just ask your question at that point as well. If you feel comfortable, we'd love to see you on camera as we like to engage as we go through tonight's presentation, but certainly understand if you choose not to. So again, this program will go approximately 60 minutes. The program itself will have a presentation for the first 45 minutes and then allow time at the end for questions. But as I mentioned, we may have some time during the course of the presentation to do that as well. So we hope you find value and enjoy today's Phoenix Forum, and please check out future events as well. We do have one more scheduled here on March 16th. Topic will be on education K-12. So if you're interested in that, I encourage you to please register ahead of time. So with that, again, I'd like to welcome our presenters and turn it over to our guests from the Brown County Port and Recovery Department. Whoever would like to kick things off.
Sure. Well, I'll start. So I'm Dean Hain. I'm the Director for Brown County Port and Resource Recovery Department. As mentioned, I graduated in 91 from GB. I think, John, you were also 91. I don't know if you were December or May, but graduated in 91 with a degree. At the time, they had environmental science with an emphasis in resource management, which was like landfills and wastewater treatment plants, and then a second major in environmental planning. Thereafter, I ended up getting an MBA as well locally, but I've been with Brown County for a long time, and the department name is the Brown County Port and Resource Recovery Department. So I'm just going to give a broad overview of our department, our activities, and then turn over some of those activities to Chris and Ben to talk about. We can keep this informal. If anyone has any questions, just go ahead and ask them. So with our department, we have two pieces to the puzzle: the port. So the Port of Green Bay is overseen by our department, responsible for the economic activities of moving commerce and creating jobs. So we have 14 businesses that make up the Port of Green Bay. We maintain a 16-mile navigation channel. Those port businesses move commodities for the region. So our area of influence is as far south as Sheboygan, as far west as Wausau, and then up into the UP. So materials come and go, goods finished and raw materials in that service area. We have about a $147 million a year economic impact on Green Bay. We will be doing a new economic impact study this year, so we'll have some new data. We're responsible for just short of 2,000 jobs a year. So that's kind of a nutshell, the Port of Green Bay. And you think to yourself, and I always do, and I always have to explain, you think, what is the port and resource recovery? What possible arrangement would bring these two entities together? And the connection is the Port of Green Bay. One of the responsibilities of our department, not only doing legislative and regulatory things, but we have to manage the dredge material that is dredged to keep the navigation channel open to commerce, which means in Wisconsin that those sediments, when they come ashore, are treated as solid waste, no different than your garbage or your recyclables. So that's what brings port and resource recovery together. So the port deals with dredge material. We have Renard Island, which is right off of GB, by Bay Beach there. That's an old confined disposal facility, dredge material. We have an upland facility on the west side, on the north end of Military Avenue. That's the Bayport beneficial reuse rehandling facility. And then we have the Cat Island Chain Project, which is placement for clean sediments out in the bay. If you take Tower Drive, you will see, if you're looking northwest, you'll see a rock wall. Basically, it's a road. And then we'll be, over the next 30 years, creating 300 acres of historic islands that existed. So that's the port side. And then you get to the resource recovery side, and this is where the other guys are going to chime in. We have a waste transfer station where we take all of the regions, Brown County and then northern and western counties garbage. From there, our transfer station consolidates that garbage and moves it to the South landfill or the Outagamie County landfill. So Ben will talk about the South landfill. And additionally, we have a recycling facility. Chris could probably touch on this a little bit. Transfer station where we take all the county recyclables from the route trucks, consolidate them into semi-loads, and move them to Outagamie County's processing facility, which is owned by Brown, Winnebago, and Outagamie County, where they're sorted, processed, and sold as commodities. And then we have household hazardous waste, one of the few and first permanent collection facilities that Chris will talk about here. So maybe I can kind of end there. I don't know if there's any questions, or we can go from there. Hearing no questions, Chris or Ben, you want to talk about your program areas? You got to turn off. Yeah, there you go.
Yep. I don't know if Chris wants to go first. I can if you want. If he wants me to. I'm Ben Hintz, as Brian mentioned, landfill manager for I'll say new South landfill. It's been open since January 3rd of last year, January 3rd of 2022. It's in partnership with our Brown, Outagamie, and Winnebago counties. So we call it a BOW landfill because that's, the acronym we use for those three counties. It's a landfill that's kind of been 20 years or so in the making, initially kind of planned out in the mid 90s when we were not part of that BOW system. And once that agreement happened, there was an Outagamie County landfill and Winnebago County landfill prior to that. So we no longer had a need for a landfill immediately. So it kind of delayed that process a little bit. So the very initial planning, mid 90s, and then back when I first started with Brown County in 2018, we were able to actually get more going. We did a plan of operation that we had to get approved with our DNR, and that kind of dictates all the things that we're able to do at the landfill and how we operate. The actual landfill footprint, the overall footprint is just shy of 70 acres, 69.6 acres total. We have a 8,300,000 cubic yard capacity for waste. Right now of that 69 acres, we have about 25.7 acres constructed for our initial landfill footprint. There's 2 more phases to that to get up to that full total capacity of waste that we take, serving the Brown County area. It took about 900 million, or not 900 million, 900,000 cubic yards of clay. So just shy of 1 million yards got excavated in 2020 for this first phase of our landfill. And then that was in 2020, 2021, we put liner down. There's a whole process to the construction of that landfill where we had to put in 4 feet of clay and compact it and put in a plastic liner to protect the water, the groundwater in the area, things like that, with the drainage kind of layer on top of that for any liquid that might get into our landfill or is generated by that landfill as waste decays and get that pumped out. And that gets hauled to new water or a sewer drop-off system that we have in De Pere. So we had a lot of infrastructure to put in 2021 with that liner, but it's also the first, they call it greenfield site in the state in quite a while. I want to say since 2003, but I might be a little mistaken. There's one by Chilton was the last one. So we had to put in new roads around our facility, new maintenance building, a new scale house, and new scales, and buy all new equipment because it was a new landfill. It wasn't all new, but new to us. Some of it was used because we wanted to try to do what was best for us monetarily, and then get new operators to operate this equipment in landfill and get them trained. So between 2021 and 2022, we had a whole lot of moving parts and pieces to get up and running, and so far it's gone very smooth. We took in about 392,000 tons of waste last year. Not all, straight garbage from households. Some of it's some industrial waste from businesses and factories around here. And then we use that waste just landfilling it, or we can use it beneficially to help with cover and odors and things like that. So overall, the operation's gone good. The training's gone well. The equipment's worked well. We've had to do a lot of research on that. For filling within the landfill, we have to compact that waste. We did some research on compactors. Usually what you'll see if you see any other landfill in the state, you'll see a landfill compactor that has 4 big steel drums on it. They're basically just converted front end loaders that have big steel drums and a blade. We were able to find something that's purpose built for landfill operations that should serve us better. And it's the first one in the state, not the nation, but first one in the state. So we were able to find something that we feel works better for landfill operations, and people have come out to see it. Outagamie used it prior to us because we're partnered with them, and they had a need for it a couple months before we started that operation. And they were very impressed with it, and they were used to the 4-wheel old style ones. And their next purchase, when they get one, they said it'd be one of these new ones that it's called the TANA compactor. That's the brand, TANA, and it's worked well for us. I'll let Chris dive into his overview of our hazardous waste, and what I think Chris does for me is keep hazardous waste out of our landfill and divert a lot of the stuff that we're not allowed to take or don't want to take in our landfill because it's hazardous. I'll let Chris give his overview of our hazardous waste facility.
Thanks. I'm Chris Glenn. I graduated in 2000 with a degree in environmental science and a minor in policy and planning. I manage our traditionally it's called household hazardous waste, but we changed that name to the hazardous material recovery facility. We'll get the reason why in a second. What we deal with is pretty much all the waste materials that I consider fall between the bins. You can't put it in your recycling bin, and you shouldn't put it in your garbage bin. So that the material that quote unquote falls between the bins is your traditional material that would be considered hazardous, toxic, corrosive, reactive, flammable, in your home, aerosol cans, pesticides, paints. And then we also provided established outlets for material that the general public wanted better outlets for. Better as in rather than landfilling. So we grew the facility to include, things like batteries, lamps, latex paint, cooking oil, and antifreeze oil, fire extinguishers. So pretty much we're kind of like the catch-all. If it doesn't go into your trash bin or it doesn't go into your recycling bin, likely the good chance that we have an outlet for it. We are a permanent facility. We are one of 4 publicly owned permanent facilities. The other ones are Dane County, La Crosse County, and Marathon County are the other 3, and we're the 4th. We started as a Brown County service only, and then our facility expanded and grew to accept material from any resident willing to use our facility. People as far north as Menominee, Michigan, far south as Sheboygan, and as far west as Wapaka, Waushara counties. So we were truly expanded to become a regional facility. We also accept material from businesses that qualify as a very small quantity generator. That's one of the reasons why we have changed our name from the traditional household hazardous waste to hazardous material recovery facility, in order to reflect the idea that we do take material from not just residential public, but also from small businesses. We average probably anywhere from 9 to 10,000 people a year using our facility. 200 to 300 businesses that use our program, and we provided disposal options, disposal outlets for material from other counties, other neighboring counties. We don't deal too much with volume like recycling or landfill does, but we have a much wider variety of types of materials, which includes even some cylinders. We handle gas cylinders. Our program also is responsible for the sharps collection program for the county. Just about every pharmacy is participating in that program that provides the general public a free option to dispose of their sharps. At most pharmacies are participating in that program. So we manage that program also. So it's a wide variety, from businesses up to as small as a cabinet maker, to different schools throughout the state that have a wide variety of materials, from paints to elemental sodium, elemental potassium metals. So it's a pretty interesting area, and we deal with a lot of variation.
I'm gonna, if you don't mind, stop there. We have a couple questions. I'll ask the first one, and then whoever would like to answer it. Can you speak on how unique the BOW agreement is, and how the size of the new South landfill compares to other municipally owned landfills versus privately operated landfills?
Ben, you can chime in here as well. But with regard to the BOW agreement, so this is something that's in place. It's a 3-county agreement. The first one was executed, 20 years ago, and it was actually really before intergovernmental cooperation was even in vogue. It was very insightful of those solid waste directors at the time to recognize the efficiencies of having a large scale landfill and how much cheaper you can run a large scale landfill to save taxpayers, our municipalities, us as consumers and residents, for waste disposal services. So that is unique. And then most recently, maybe a year and a half ago, we revised that landfill agreement, and we have now secured landfill capacity for the Tri-County region and beyond, out past 2042. So we have a very stable system, and our BOW agreement involves sharing of landfill services and transfer station cost services of getting waste to those disposal sites. So that's kind of the BOW agreement. With regard to the landfill size, ours is like 9 million cubic yards. Outagamie's new one is a little smaller than that, only because that's the maximum footprint that they are planning on building a landfill to maximize that footprint, but yet they don't have enough land to get past. I think it's like 7.5 million. Is that correct, Ben? Somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's right around there. Also, for our size, I noticed on John's question, compared to private, New South landfill compares to other municipally owned landfills versus private operated landfills. It's fairly comparable size-wise. I mean, ours is 70 acres when everything's said and done. And then if there's any potentials for expansions, then we'd have additional landfills. And prior to my time with Brown County, I worked for a consulting firm, and generally not for publicly owned landfills, it was for private. And a lot of those private ones were very similar as far as there's the number that I can think of that had 60 to 80, acre footprint landfills with various expansions within those that had, a couple landfill expansions of those same sizes. So our size is the same. What the BOW helps us do is get more tons at a single within a year, or however you want to look at it, because we're able to get Winnebago tons and Outagamie tons as well as other, a few tons outside of Brown County from other haulers versus other private entities, having to shop around and get everything they can. Ours has some getting directed to us from those other municipalities.
Great, thank you both for that. Again, certainly if there's other questions, certainly add in the chat box or just raise your hand on the top of the thing and we can call me as well. But to have one other question, what do you see becoming the next big issue or issues or materials in the household hazardous waste department?
Chris, you want to talk about those batteries?
Sure. Well, yeah, it's one thing that I think that our program takes pride in is trying to identify those problematic areas and be prepared for them before they start coming into our programming and becoming an issue. Or we're looking at materials that end up in the landfill that should be handled in a better way. One of those would be like 1 pound propane cylinders. All the volume of scrap metal and wasted, potentially wasted gas that technically the residential public can throw out because they are exempt from hazardous waste regulations. Another thing we tried, so we have an outlet for those where those do get off, sent off for recycling, and then any gas that's left in them gets reclamated. We try to we create an outlet for fire extinguishers. Again, that's one other material that that normally are just thrown out. The aluminum bodies, the metal bodies are just being wasted. We try to find an outlet for, so we decant those off, the ABC and the BC powder. We try to find an outlet for those materials. However, the powder itself is coated in silicone powder so that it doesn't cake up in the fire extinguisher. The problem is that you have to remove that. I do believe you need my chemistry is lagging a little bit. There's ionic and solvents, different types of solvents, ionic solvents, and can't think of the other one. But yeah, you need something like acetone to dissolve that silicone, and that just becomes a big process that we don't have the infrastructure to put in. But yes, the biggest problem right now would be lithium batteries, rechargeable batteries, lithium ion batteries in particular. DNR currently has opened up universal waste rules. Universal wastes are wastes that originate as a hazardous waste, but are generated in high volumes by both public and private individuals, where the government wants to endorse the recycling of those materials and to prevent a large volume of that material going into landfills. So they've opened up the universal waste rules through, I think it's like WA 1221 scope statement. So we have, along with other recycling waste organizations in the state, have proposed the idea of including battery containing devices as a universal waste. There's some pros and cons behind that, but yeah, the biggest one would be batteries, battery containing devices, and forecasting with it. A greater issue would be, are those lithium batteries of better technology that are stronger and hold a higher charge? The DOT has special regulations for batteries that fall above and below a 300 watt-hour rating. So those are the future batteries that are will be even a bigger hurdle for us, or issue for us. We see them now. They haven't gotten to a few of them have gotten onto our facility, but we're talking like e-bike batteries. We're talking about lawn equipment, lawn repair, lawn maintenance equipment, lawnmowers and things like that. Yeah, but that's a problem. And also communicating to other waste entities in the state that are unaware of the DOT rules. The DOT regulated lithium batteries 2016, 2017. And I think that most waste industry are not aware of the DOT or the hazardous material part of the DOT, the regulations to get from one point A to point B. Many of those devices that do have those lithium batteries, we also have an eCycle Wisconsin program that require recycling for some electronics. Many of these devices fall between the cracks. They're not affected by the eCycle Wisconsin or the electronics ban. And it's one of those things we're at the mercy of the public to decide to recycle those and manage those in the best way possible. But yeah, the biggest one would be lithium batteries, and then the future strong, more powerful lithium batteries.
We have another question, but if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in quick and ask a follow-up question to Chris in particular, just as a more layman's terms of, you deal with hazardous waste, and obviously the intent is people to voluntarily dispose of that properly. How do you deal with, or do you get stuff that goes into one of those other two pools, the recyclable and or the landfill areas, and how do those get then from there to you? Or is that I'm sure that's a huge concern, because there's some that just aren't following the rules, guidelines, whatever you want to call it.
Not sure if I understood the whole question, but if these materials get into the other landfill, the recycling waste streams.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, the intent is for people to dispose of those hazardous materials properly. But there's, whether they just don't know, or I'm just going to throw them in my garbage anyway, or I'm going to just put it in recyclables. I think it's a recyclable item. It's not. How do you do? I mean, I'm sure that's a huge challenge in this whole scope of things of regular, homeowners making those ill-informed decisions, I guess. I don't know how big of an issue that is, but I just thought that might be something that would be interesting to know how you deal with that.
I'll jump in, Chris, if you don't mind. Because Chris works at a different facility than us. So on the landfill side, he's not out here like talking with people. We do watch, we have operators, we go through some training with them all the time on what we can and cannot take. So they watch for hazardous waste. We're also not allowed to take, like Chris mentioned, universal wastes. We're not allowed to take lead acid batteries, and then we avoid lithium batteries, even though they're actually allowed to be taken. They do have fire risk. We watch for electronics, TVs, computers, laptops, phones, and appliances. Tires are another item we're not allowed to take. So our operators watch for, loads as they get unloaded when they're, spreading the waste and compacting the waste for things that we're not allowed to take. And they'll get out, set it aside, or push it aside, and we'll gather those up and set those aside, and then bring them to Chris if they're a hazardous waste that needs to get brought there, and electronic that they separate out there as well. And then the other waste like tires and things we separate there. So
I've talked to some landfill people, and I think many landfill operators have changed their practices. Many have a big pile of clay nearby their active fill area for not if, but when they get a fire. So they have that clay available to smother that fire right away. Battery fires in the landfill aren't as they're bad, but not as bad because there's not as much fuel. I mean, it's in the open air. There's rain, there's water, there's liquids, there's non-combustible materials. Potential fire at our recycling transfer station. Those are one of those things where you walk by our window that shows our recycling tip floor, and we often do double takes. What was that? No, it wasn't. Was that smoke? No, it wasn't. So any fires in our recycling area has obviously there's a lot of paper, a lot of combustible materials. Any spark there is more catastrophic, is very much more catastrophic than maybe a spark at the landfill. But you're more likely to get a fire at a landfill due to people throwing out these devices than you would at in a recycling facility.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it. And Benjamin, appreciate that. Another question. How much did you know about the waste industry when you were at UWGB as a student, and what are the most rewarding parts of this career? Whoever would like to take that first.
I can jump in. I figure we'll probably all three end up jumping in. Maybe as John could attest, as one of my professors when I was at UWGB, I didn't really know anything about the waste industry. He was teaching a class that I was in, and he mentioned actually a few days in a row or once a week for a couple of times that there was an internship with Brown County at their solid waste facility. And I was like, well, after a couple of times, I was like, maybe I should have an internship under my belt and see what that does for me. And great, it's at a landfill, not exactly a dream job, or anything like that. But it at least gets me some experience and maybe gets my foot in the door somewhere. So I didn't know anything about the solid waste industry prior to that. Then started at internship there at Brown County and was able to learn a bit in my internship. And they happened to be at that time constructing a gas to energy facility with an engineering firm. That I handed them my resume, and they hired me, and I was able to get a lot more solid waste experience with consulting firms, going all over the country and seeing all kinds of different landfills. And then my predecessor here at Brown County, prior to me being landfill manager, I was a landfill gas technician with Brown County, and my predecessor as a gas technician retired, and then I applied for that position and was able to rejoin Brown County as an employee instead of just an intern, but gained a lot of experience through that internship and then consulting, but not much, prior to that at all.
Go ahead, Chris.
I would say the degree at UWG, the environmental science degree, I think gives you a strong foundation of and possibilities of jumping off that into different areas. I think even with that foundation, I think there's going to be a lot of information that you'll need to find out and learn on yourself, for yourself, when you get into that direction, to go further down that road in whatever direction you choose. For me, for example, when it comes to like regulations and policy and newer into compliance with regulations that are coming out, I found it best to go to those entities that try to sell you stuff. Like JJ Keller trying to sell you a training program, or Daniel's Training trying to sell you a training program. Look at what I found is that worked well. Look at what they're trying to sell you. Look up the regulations that they are citing. Read that regulation, and then determine if that regulation does apply to your program or not. So oddly enough, I found that as a good way to know what's out there, and then to know what does or does not apply to to my field or to my job. So oddly enough, I found that as a good outlet to learn more about my job.
All right, I'll go last. I might have been a strange duck, but even back in high school, I just remember, and so McDonald's was big. They used to have these styrofoam clamshells to hold your Big Mac, to hold your quarter pounder. And I remember going in there and I would order it and I'd make them wrap it in paper because I just knew that wasn't good. I mean, why are we having this styrofoam? So, I mean, I was somehow interested in waste right from just being a kid, and why aren't we recycling? What's happening to all this stuff? And so I kind of went and I wrote papers on it in high school and got to college. And I mean, that's what I was surprisingly interested in. And I would have to say, yeah, I was probably a little strange kid, but I'm probably still now a strange adult. So, so that's kind of my interest started even in high school.
Thank you all for sharing that. Go ahead, Ben.
I shouldn't have. I mentioned that the landfill internship wasn't exactly a dream, working in waste. But as I got to know it, there's a lot more to it, and you get a lot of enjoyment out of it as you learn that industry. It's more than just the garbage in a hole. So it might not have started out as a dream job, but things change over time.
Do you still have an environmental law class? Is one of your courses? Dr. Sheberly, I had her, a professor, I don't know if she's there any longer there or not, but I took her class, and again, oddball, maybe it's an oddball field to get into, but regulations and working within the regulations and trying to work around those regulations within the regulations to be able to better manage your program. But one class I enjoyed the most was Professor Sheberly's class, and that environmental law class was a different foundation and all the different niches of clean act, clean air. I actually use NEPA. If people talk about NEPA, I actually know what they're talking about nowadays. RCRA, which is the foundation of hazardous waste. So that environmental law class was I love that class.
I agree, Chris. Same professor too.
Great, thank you guys for that, those answers. I have another question. What other safety concerns and prevention measures are part of your careers? What are some things that you've had to get more education on or background in?
Well, safety and PPE have come a long way and continue to evolve. Chris is our safety guru, but you just think of what we're dealing with: moving ships, dredging, everything to do with the landfill, everything to do with recycling is all involves machinery and heavy equipment. And every day my biggest concern is, what we have to do this safely, because our piece of equipment, you could run over a person and never feel them, not even know you had done that. So we really got to pound safety into our people, and it's foundational to what we do in the solid waste industry. I forget, Ben can probably chime in. I don't know if it's the third or fourth highest risk occupational job, and I think most of that revolves around waste and recycling collectors in the street getting hit. I think it's more municipal than at the landfill, but our industry still is very dangerous. People end up in dumpsters, end up getting flipped into trucks. At the landfill, we have rules that you have to stay within arm's reach of equipment, so you don't get run over by a compactor or dozer. So it is very important, safety and prevention. So I'll turn it over to the Ben or Chris.
Dean mentioned, truck drivers. We have a lot of moving parts at the landfill, heavy equipment moving, and visibility is generally good. They all have backup cameras as well that they also use. We have radios for our operators to talk if they see somebody walking up, things like that, but keeping people close to their equipment so that they're just that much more out of the way, or in an area where you would expect them to be. There's always, risks. We're in trash. We don't know what's coming in the trash. There could be sharp objects. We have to clean stuff off of equipment. So one of our requirements is, if anybody's cleaning equipment off, trash off, I have them wear cut and puncture resistant gloves, along with wearing eye protection if they're cleaning trash off the equipment in case something wants to fling or flick back at them and hit them in the face or eye, so that they have some vision protection, just because we never know what we're getting into. Along with foot protection, safety toe boots and shoes and things like that. That way, their feet are protected. We don't know what we're going to see, so we have to do what we can to protect ourselves as much as possible.
One of the ways we reduce costs and disposal of our materials is what we do, something we call bulking materials, which basically taking the contents of small containers and basically pouring them into a drum. So our employees need to be trained well to make sure that incompatible materials do not get mixed together. That happens, and then you're closing the drum. Okay, now your drum pressurizes to a point where pressure accumulates. Say in 20 years, we might have had a couple instances where we needed assistance to do a remote open on those materials to reduce the likelihood of that pressure being released and hurting a worker. We work with I screen the businesses that come into our facility, and if they're a school lab, there's some red flags that pop up. If they have potassium metal, well, how old is the potassium metal? What are the different color differentiations of the metal? You can form superoxides that now become shock sensitive. Do they have picric acid? Well, is it dried picric acid? They say they have a can of ether. Well, what is the age of the ether? What is the can made of? So there's different potentialities of shock sensitives. They have solvents for distillation experiments in the lab experiments. Well, there's a potential for peroxide forming compounds during that distillation process. So there's segregating the materials in a proper way and asking the right questions. And then our employees do wear full face respirators to ensure that there's nothing in the air. We do have proper ventilation in our buildings, but as an extra precautionary measure, we do have full face respirators to ensure that anything that might be in the air is pulled out for workers.
Thank you for that. John Art just shared that we are still teaching environmental law here with Dr. Elizabeth Wheat. So good to know that. Just want to piggyback, and please, if there's other questions, please put in the chat box, or again, raise your hand. We'll get you verbally otherwise. But just want to kind of follow up, I guess, specifically with Benjamin and Chris, is just what is your biggest challenges, and what you really wish homeowners in particular to have a better understanding of to make your lives easier? If that makes any sense. I don't know, maybe it's a long laundry list of stuff, but is there anything that as far as your areas that you'd really wish people would be more in tune with one way or the other?
I think it goes back to what Chris was, when we were talking about the next hazardous item. I would say it's just throwing out of those lithium batteries because of that fire risk. On our end, that's probably for individual homeowners the biggest thing, because they don't generally do large enough quantities of things to really impact us, but even little things like a headlamp can light up. So no pun intended with that. Yeah, that I would say would be the biggest thing for the individual homeowners.
One of my annoyances is when homeowners bring in what I call party grab bags. They throw all their containers into a garbage bag, they throw it over their shoulder like Santa, and they bring it down to us. Well, in the meantime, covers are coming off. Things are opening up. And when it gets to us, and we have to go through that and try to, when it comes to us, we do have to segregate it out into the appropriate, waste streams, waste characteristics. And to be able to see and, and you're bringing your hand, blind into that bag, not knowing what's been mixed together. I've had an instance where I would just about had the whole bag emptied. I shook out the rest of it, and I had 3 uncapped syringes fall out of the bag. So it's things where it's like most people are wonderful, but keep all your containers upright, keep them well labeled. That's a big one. We've had reactions with mislabeled materials. Yeah, and just be patient with us.
Thank you for that. Conversely, just when you work with private businesses, how much do you proactively work with them to try to, understand what they're potentially bringing to you, and how much you just have to deal with what you have? I don't know if there's any relationships you try to build with companies to be able to do things appropriately, or how that kind of system works.
Well, for businesses, we modified our process of how businesses do request an appointment with us. We have an online process and require a description of what they're bringing. I had to crack down a little bit, be more stern on the idea of, if you don't know what it is, how do we know what it is, what it is, and how can we dispose of it if we don't know what it is? So that's one thing we had to be a little more firm on, is that we can use your generator knowledge of the material, that it's most likely this or that. And if this and that are in the same waste category, it's fine. But if you're saying it could be an oxidizing material, it could be a corrosive material, or it could be mineral spirits, okay, then we're going to need to have more information to characterize that waste, so we can dispose of it properly. And then we do it, accept businesses at a rate that's comparable to any private sector, like a Veolia, anything or along those lines. But we do get revenue off our businesses to offset the cost for a residential program. So we need to characterize the waste so we can better apply the appropriate fees.
Are there any other questions that anyone has, or with our panelists, any other information you'd like to provide as we close up here?
If I'm able to share my screen, maybe, I don't know if I have 2 screens up, if it'll work or not. Part of the Solid Waste Association of North America does have some scholarship opportunities. And they didn't have a ton of applicants this last year, so they were asking if there was a way to reach out to some universities. So if I could share it, then you guys could just see the web address to write that down, or however we want to do that. So if that's something that could be shared with people just to help, students here or there that might be interested in the solid waste industry, to just kind of help them out a little bit. I don't know if it's visible or not, so.
Yeah, I do not see it here coming up on my screen here.
There we go. Let's try that. Does that work?
Yep. We see a presentation right now.
All right, perfect. That's what it is. And it's this web address right down here is the address for that information on scholarships or how to apply.
There's no web address.
Oh, maybe you can't see it.
Yeah, we see the South Landfill PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, I'm on the wrong screen. How's that?
There we go.
It's this web address right here. So
Perfect.
sorry about that, little hiccup.
Great. Well, yeah, we'll certainly try to get that shared out to our current students, and hope others will look at that as an option in future too. So thank you for that.
Yep, absolutely.
And what John already knows is the Wisconsin Integrated Resource Management Conference happens every year. This is next week, so if you do record this and people see it, it might be too late, but it's a reoccurring conference. It's a well attended conference. We have a lot of people from UWGB. We have a lot of people from, I believe, Stevens Point are the two main colleges that tend to come. And it's pretty. I think it's very valuable for students.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all three of you for taking time to present to us this evening. Again, I hope you all enjoyed this presentation and discussion. Please consider again registering for our future Phoenix forums. If you have any suggestions on future topics, or you'd like more information about any of the information that you received here today, please certainly reach out to me, my direct email, or our alumni email, alumni@uwgb.edu. So again, thank you so much for everyone for attending, and have a great evening.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.